But the skeptics said that still doesn't prove that humans are to blame. They had one more line of scientific attack. They said global warming has nothing to do with carbon dioxide, so leave those smokestacks and gas guzzlers alone. It was all the fault of the sun. Of course the sun influences climate. The sun is the source of all weather. Every storm, every shower, every breath of wind is ultimately driven by the sun. The skeptics argued that since the Earth's climate is so dependent on the sun, it would only take small changes in the sun's behaviour to have a big effect on the climate. The key was sunspots. These dark patches are magnetic storms on the surface of the sun. They're constantly changing, which is why the skeptics believed they could reveal the true cause of climate change. This observatory has been measuring sunspots since 1881, and this is how they do it. The dome moves around till it gets in the direction of the sun, the roof opens, and then the sun comes down this telescope here and projects onto this sheet of paper. Now, I'm not putting my eye up here, because if I did, this is what would happen. The sun, just like a big magnifying glass, just sets fire to the leaf. But anyway, listen, so what you do is, rather than putting your eye there, you put a bit of paper there. Now, you have to adjust it because our sun has to be sitting right in the middle. Focus a little. You then draw in the position of the sunspots. And we get 2 today. Okay. These spots may look tiny, but each one is half the size of the Earth. And this is a relatively quiet sun. At other times, it has more spots, sometimes dozens of them. This is what scientists call an active sun. And at these times, the sun sends out huge waves of charged particles called a solar wind. For centuries, astronomers all around the world have been counting the number of sunspots. This record's from the mid-1830s, and you can just see the detail is incredible. Each of these plots is a different day. Apparently some scientists even went blind from all that staring at the sun, but what you really get from here is the dedication and devotion to record keeping. And it's from records like this that we've learned something absolutely intriguing. Back in the 17th century, there was a 50-year period in which there didn't seem to be any sunspots at all. And the fascinating thing is that this coincided with a particularly cold period of history, the so-called Little Ice Age. This was the time of frost fairs, when the River Thames froze over. It was also a time of bitter winters and famines. So people began to wonder if there was a connection between sunspots and the weather. For instance, William Herschel, the astronomer who discovered Uranus, claimed to have found a link between the number of sunspots and the price of wheat. The more sunspots, he argued, the better the weather and the better the harvest. Mind you, he also thought that the sun was inhabited by intelligent life forms. The real problem for the theory was that no one could work out how sunspot activity could be linked to the climate. The actual amount of heat given off by the sun hardly changes at all, regardless of how many sunspots there are. so the theory was largely forgotten. But in the 1990s, sunspots made a comeback, because some people argued that it was the sun and not carbon dioxide that was the cause of global warming. And they had a trump card. They believed that they'd solved the mystery of how the sun changes the climate. According to the new theory, it wasn't that the sunspot activity made the sun hotter or colder. It was much more complicated than that. It all starts far out in space, where exploding stars, called supernovas, send out powerful cosmic rays. The theory goes that when these cosmic rays get to the Earth, they interact with the atmosphere to create clouds. But when the sun is active and has lots of spots, it sends out a powerful solar wind, which blows the cosmic rays away. So an active sun means fewer clouds and a warmer world. This theory wasn't by any means proven, but it was possible. And that led some skeptics to argue that today's global warming might be caused by the natural fluctuations of the sun and not carbon dioxide. That was the message of a recent high-profile television documentary. And as evidence, they showed how solar activity and temperature seem to match up.
Solar activity, they found, rose sharply to around 1940, fell back until the 1970s, and then started to rise again.
Well, you have to say, it's a pretty convincing connection. But there is one wee problem. The graph ends in 1980. Now, when the documentary was made a couple of years ago, they had data from the 1980s and the 1990s, but they didn't show it. If we extend the graph to show that data, what you see is that the blue temperature curve should rise up. Look, there it goes. It just soars off the graph, and the red solar activity just levels off. In fact, since the 1990s, solar activity looks as if it's been on the decline, which should mean the planet has been getting cooler. Instead, we've reached record temperatures. So it's hard to escape the thought that although the sun may have played a significant role in the past, it just can't explain the present warming. The only convincing explanation is that it's down to us, human activity. There are only a tiny number of scientists who still question a human influence on climate, and yet climate skepticism hasn't gone away. You'll still see websites claiming that the Earth isn't warming up, that it's all down to the urban heat island. But that's not true. You'll still hear claims that there's proof that the Earth was hotter during the medieval warm period. But that's not true. And you'll still hear people claiming that the sun somehow disproves global warming. But that's not true either. So why is this stuff still around? The problem is, there are a lot of people who don't want global warming to be true. The fact is, I'm one of them. I wish there was no such thing as global warming. Because taking action to prevent climate change is going to affect all our lives and mean giving up some of our freedom. Freedom to go anywhere, do anything, to consume whatever you want when you want. The freedom to have an open road and a car full of cheap petrol.
Don't tell me not to fly, I've simply got to.
It's not only my freedom that's threatened. Cutting back on greenhouse gases threatens the freedom of companies to go about their business.